Okay, we're going to be talking about the press sequence in this video. With the presses, we're going to cover four: a strict press, a push jerk, and a split jerk. And often, these movements are paired with a clean or a hang clean. So you may see, specifically in the Olympics, they do a clean and jerk, or any sort of Olympic weightlifting competitions, you'll see a clean followed by a jerk. But for today, we're just going to keep them separate. Let's go ahead and get our feet positioning set. Feet underneath of our hips, toes angled out slightly. We angle out our toes to make sure our knees drive out in the direction that our toes are facing as we move into a dip, which we will for several of the movements. As far as hand positioning goes, we're going to have our hands just outside of our shoulders, and you're going to use a full grip. This is not the hook grip that we used in the snatch or the clean. This is just a regular grip with your hand, your thumbs outside of your fingers, okay? So they're not being wrapped by those fingers. And we want the barbell to be on our shoulders. So right now, I'm kind of in an awkward position with my elbows back and that barbell out in front of my chest, not even touching my body. What I want to do is roll that barbell back onto my shoulders with those elbows slightly forward. Now, they're not way up here. I'm not choking myself with the bar. They're not parallel to the floor, but rather kind of angled down as so with the barbell touching my shoulders. Now, if you're inflexible, you may not be able to get to the position, especially if you're just using a PVC pipe. So if that's okay if you're out here, this will improve over time. The more that you do CrossFit, the more you focus on mobility and the warm-ups that we do. But what tends to happen is when we do add weight to the bar, you can at least somewhat get it close to that starting position there. Okay, so once I'm in this position, I also want to make sure that I keep my body in a nice straight position with my core nice and tight and my hips rolled under. So right now, I'm kind of in a relaxed position. I have a pretty naturally big arch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll my hips under, and then I'm going to engage my core by pushing my breath down into the bottom part of my stomach. And this is really just a good thing to use in general for all lifts as far as keeping your core tight. When we keep our core tight, we're not holding our breath. So there is no point during any lift you should ever hold your breath, because that could cut off oxygen supply to you, and then could make you pass out, especially if you have a very large load. So rather than hold our breath, we're going to redistribute our breath to the bottom part of our stomach. So it's kind of like if someone's going to come punch you, you tighten up. That's what you want to do. Take that breath and put it down here towards the bottom part of your diaphragm. So you can see I'm still talking, but I've got that nice tight core. And then for my overhead position, what I'm going to do once I'm in this position is I'm going to push this bar in a completely straight line. I'm going to move my head out of the way. I'm going to push it right in front of my face. And then when I get to the top, I'm going to drive my head through my shoulders so that the bar finishes over the midsection of my body. And then bring it back down, moving my head out of the way once again. Head out of the way, right in front of my face. Drive my head through, lock those elbows, finish here, and then pull it on down. Okay? What we don't want to see, or a really common mistake that you will tend to make, is that you're not driving your head through those shoulders. So we'll often see a finishing position like this with the bar out in front of us. If you can see the bar in your peripheral vision, then you're doing it wrong. So what you tend to need to do is pull it back as far as you can. But then what tends to happen is when you pull it back, you end up arching your back. So then you've got to remember to correct that and pull those hips under and then drive up on those shoulders. Let's go ahead and do 3 strict shoulder presses together. Feet underneath our hips, toes angled out. Go ahead and get that barbell on those shoulders with those elbows angled down slightly. Tuck those hips under, engage your core. 1, 2, 3. Good. Next thing we're going to do is a push press. So it's going to be the same exact starting position, but this time we're going to add a dip. So we're going to use leg power to help drive the barbell or the PVC overhead. When we do a dip, we want it to be short, fast. We also want to keep a nice vertical position as we do that. So when I set up, I'm going to put my feet underneath my hips. My toes are going to be angled out slightly. I'm going to have that same starting position that I had for the strict press, hips tucked under and core engaged. And then what I'm going to do here is a short, fast dip. Dip, dip, dip. Okay? Now, common mistake that people make is they don't dip. They'll turn it into a squat, which then ultimately ends up making this position or this movement a thruster, which we'll learn later in our squat sequence, versus a press. So short, fast dips, only go down a couple of inches, and then use that leg power to aggressively push that barbell overhead. So here we go, putting it all together. Dip and drive, dip, drive. Same finishing position as the press, overhead. Let's do 2 to the front, dip and go. And one more, that's your push press. Okay, now we're gonna move on to the 2 finishing jerks, and this is part of the Olympic weightlifting sequence. And these tend to be a little bit more technical, so we're going to walk you through a few additional steps. But ultimately, it is the same starting position. Feet underneath their hips, toes angled out slightly, barbell on that front rack position with those elbows angled out, down, hips tucked under, core engaged. Short, fast dip, okay, for both the push jerk and the split jerk. For the push jerk, instead of just pressing the bar up to the sky, we're actually going to take hold of that bar and push our body against it, so that we push ourselves underneath of the bar versus just pressing it up in an overhead position, okay? So when I do this, I'm going to dip, push myself against the weight of the bar as I drive myself down underneath of it, so that I end up landing in this kind of dipped position underneath. One more time, I'm going to dip, push my body against the weight of the bar, and then drive myself underneath. Okay, same finishing position, and then once you do finish in that dip position, here you'll want to stand up to complete the lift. Now, for that particular example, I didn't move my feet, and you don't have to move your feet, but some people prefer to add a little bit of a jump. So if we jump in the push jerk, you're going to drive off of your heels as you push yourself against the weight of the bar and land back on your heels. And if you're having a hard time with the coordination of this movement, then I definitely recommend trying to do it this way. So what I'm going to have you guys do is set up here. We're going to go ahead and start in our dip position. I want you to wiggle your toes for me, and then you're going to drive off your heels, land back on your heels into that finishing position of the jerk. Show you from a side view. Go ahead and get into our dip. Drive off your heels, land on your heels, push yourself under the bar. And then stand to finish. Okay, so it doesn't have to have that jumping position, but a lot of times it helps people with the coordination. Now certainly we don't generally start in that dipping position. You have to start in an elevated position and then add the dip. So let's go ahead and try a couple of those now. So go ahead and start in our position, hips tucked under, core nice and tight. We're gonna dip, drive off those heels, land back on those heels. Dip, drive, down under. Dip, drive, down under. That is your push jerk. Okay, last but not least is going to be our split jerk. And this is the lift you would use to try and lift the most amount of weight over your head out of all of the presses. Generally with each of the presses you should be able to lift approximately 20% more. The strict press, mainly you're going to be using your shoulder power to get it overhead. With the push press you start to engage the legs, and then with the push jerk and the split jerk, we're lengthening the distance that we have to push it up overhead because we're driving our body under. Okay, so as far as the split jerk goes, you want to make sure that you are picking one leg to use for your split, and you're just going to go with that one leg forever. You don't have to alternate it or switch it up at any point. You generally want your dominant leg to go forward. However, some people, are ambidextrous on their legs, or just may not feel the most natural with their dominant leg. So what we generally tell people to do is to pretend that you're falling forward. Whatever leg you use to catch yourself should be the leg that you generally put forward on a split jerk. And then as far as the distance of our split goes, what I'm going to have you guys do is you're going to stand here, and then you're going to take 3 of your feet. So I'm going to kind of stand behind one of these lines back here, and then I'm going to lead with my dominant foot, and I'm going to go right, left, right. Then I'm going to put my left foot back behind that line. So I'm essentially 3 of my feet distance from front leg to back leg. And then from here, I'm going to dip, bend both legs so that the weight is centered evenly amongst my right leg and my back leg. And this is going to be my finishing position of my split. Notice that my toe is up and it's not flat or straight here. And notice that my front leg is not straight, it's bent. Both legs bent, weight distributed evenly, toe off the floor, not in the back. So what we're going to do is once you figure out that distance and which leg you want to use, we're going to do a couple dip and splits where we just practice finishing in that position. I'm going to have you put your hands on your hips and we're going to dip and split. And dip, split, show you a side view, dip, split, dip, split. Okay, now this is going to be our finishing position for the split jerk before bringing our feet back together to complete the lift. I'm going to go ahead and pick up my PVC pipe here. Same starting position that we talked about on the strict press, the push jerk. Feet underneath their hips, toes angled out slightly, bar in that front rack position, on our shoulders with those elbows slightly pulled down, hips tucked under, nice tight core. Short, fast dip. This time I'm going to jump into that split position, but I'm going to drive forcefully the bar overhead and land with my arms locked at the same time my feet hit. Show you a front view. Okay, now what you'll notice, or you may have noticed, is that after I finish the split position, I'm bringing my feet back together before I actually lower the bar. Okay, and that's going to be that's necessary for any weightlifting competition you do or any CrossFit workout to be considered an RX completed full range of motion split jerk. So generally what we tell people to do is to lift that front leg back first, and then the back leg, and then to help bring those feet back together. And the reason we do that is because if you have a heavy load and you try and bring your back foot up, what tends to happen is that you end up kind of losing your balance and dropping the barbell forward. So this way, we're going to shift the weight to our back leg, release that front foot, bring it about halfway in, then bring that back leg to meet it, and then lower it out. Let's go ahead and try a couple more. Starting position, hips tucked under, nice tight core, short, fast dip, split, down, dip and split. Okay, that's our press sequence.